Today's review is going to be about the Houndmaster and what he can do in your lineup and about approximately how many I'd maybe recommend in a roster. The Houndmaster has a great versatility of skills. He can be a great support, okay at healing himself and offering stress heals to the party, but he mostly accelerates at doing some bleed damage and some raw damage along with some marked builds and possibly hurting beasts more than other people. Houndmasters have always been a favorite of mine the last two playthroughs due to the fact that they have great versatility of hitting, they have stress heals, and as I said before, they can heal themselves. They're a rather self-efficient character that will make your dungeon runs rather easier in the beginning. I do think they fall off a little bit in the later game, but not too much that they're ineffective and that you regret having them on your roster still. They're also very good at trap disarm and scouting, which will make your medium and longer dungeons significantly easier. I'm going to highlight one skill today, which I used him for in most medium dungeons in the early game, which is why I have about 2 to 3 Houndmasters in my roster. To continue the trend, I'll read his background. A tough and uncommonly compassionate ex-lawman, the Houndmaster and his faithful wolfhound work in tandem to bring down their enemies and protect the innocent. Together, they stalk the back ranks, bursting forth in a flurry of harrying bleeds, gnashing teeth, and stunning blows. Should the tide of the battle turn, the pair can support an ailing party by protecting the weak and rallying the stressed. Very accurate once again. Very good at hitting all ranks of the row. I do often use the Houndmaster hit the back rows because of that great versatility wherever he's at in the lineup, and you're going to see that as we go through the first two skills of Hounds Rush and Hounds Harry. Regarding the support aspect of that, he does have some pretty good support skills. We'll examine the last 4. Hounds Rush. Hounds Rush is pretty much his basic attack move. If you don't put on Hounds Rush, I would imagine you at least have Hounds Harry on, because after that he has really no damage abilities except for Blackjack at the very bottom, which we will talk about. Hounds Rush has a kind of a low accuracy, only at 105. I would really like to see it around 110, because if an individual has 25 to 30 dodge, that reduces the accuracy to about 75 to 80, which isn't that great to hit. Crit modifier of 9% is pretty high. The average bleed of 140 base is decent. It's about average, if not average. However, the bleed of this ability really isn't the main thing you probably use it for, because it's only 2 points for 3 rounds, so you figure 6 bleed. Some other skills have 4 to 5, so you figured what this skill can do in 3 rounds, other skills can literally do in 1. But it is a nice benefit. What really tops off Hounds Rush as a potential really hard hitting ability is the 35% damage against Beast and the 100% damage versus Marked. The Houndmaster with the damage increase item and attacking Beast or a marked person can be devastating. Hounds Rush can also be used between positions 2 and 4, which makes it a rather versatile skill, and it can hit any position in the any lineup, making it a strong attack row diversity on your end. Hounds Harry. Hounds Harry once again has 105 accuracy. I'd like to see that a little more. You can pair the Houndmaster with maybe a Jester or a Man-at-Arms to give him just a little bit of extra accuracy to ensure his attacks are going to hit. The damage modification and crit modifier are reducing this ability, so it's minus 75% on damage and minus 1% to the critical chance. Bleed is 150%, and now this has 3 points of bleed for 3 rounds, which is slightly better. Still not the highest bleed, but the fact that it applies it to all 4 rows makes it a rather devastating ability if you can pair it up with some other attacks that hit multiple people at the same time. Also, the 150% base bleed is about 10% higher than average, which makes it a pretty good chance to make someone bleed. One final note to Hounds Harry, it can be used at any position in your lineup, making it rather good once again, because if you're in the front, you can Hounds Harry everyone. If you're in the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, wherever you're at, you can hit the whole lineups. It's very good. Target Whistle. Accuracy 120, which means most people are not going to dodge this. It does mark the target, obviously since it's a marking ability. Usually they don't do damage, so minus 100% to damage. Now it has a 170% base chance to debuff the target for 30%, and that's really where I would say you probably would want to use this ability. The marking's nice, but you can bring this along just to decrease someone's 40-50% down to 20, because minus 30% is pretty huge. Outside of that, I would rather have other people mark instead of the Houndmaster, because obviously the Houndmaster can accelerate on the mark on his own, and I don't like taking a turn. to not have him do damage, but rather to obviously go on someone else's mark, which is why I did the occultist mark strategy recently, and it worked rather well. Just like Hounds Harry, it doesn't care about any position on your side or any position on the enemy side, once again making a rather good choice for him to really function in any spot on your lineup and to also hit any enemy on the enemy lineup. Cry Havoc. Cry Havoc's going to be our first ability with the most minimal row versatility on your side. It's still 3 and 4, which is pretty good. Obviously, it will still affect everyone on your lineup for a 74% chance to remove 6 stress. Cry Havoc isn't the most reliable way to reduce stress on heavy stressed individuals, because obviously there's about a 25% chance that they're not going to get it, unlike the Jester where you decide they can take off 12 to 17 stress depending on your trinkets. You can really reduce stress quicker, and this also doesn't reduce incoming stress. Therefore, if you miss that person, then they take more stress. You're really not stopping it. And also, I like the Houndmaster to use this ability more as the fight's calming down rather than to save you from high stress damage. I often keep my Houndmaster in rows 3 to 4, so often Cry Havoc is on, but not always. Guard Dog. Guard Dogs, there's some pretty good strats with this. Obviously you guard an ally, and then you give yourself a plus 20 dodge. I believe this lasts 2 rounds, so you can get yourself 40 dodge on a consistent basis. Now what I will warn about that is you're obviously going to be in this never-ending cycle of dodging to keep that dodge high. Now you could guard for 2 rounds, but if you really want to dodge a 40 rather than just 20, you're going to have to guard twice in a row, and therefore you're going to be in this cyclical process of never being able to attack with a Houndmaster. This may work on a boss strategy or maybe an enemy such as a giant in the Weld, because if it keeps attacking one person, you have a dodge of 80 on your Houndmaster or something comparable to that. Gonna miss, and at that point you may not want to sacrifice 20 to 40 dodge if he keeps attacking the one individual you're protecting, thus making Guard Dog possibly a good niche pick depending on the boss you're going against or possibly the enemies you face. I personally never found myself keeping the ability on, but once again, that's not to disregard that this ability cannot be great in certain situations. The awesome thing about Guard Dog as well, it functions between positions 1 to 4. A common thing you're going to see with the Houndmaster is most of his abilities are going to at least function between positions 2 and 4, if not 1 through 4, which makes him a really solid choice to place him anywhere in your lineup really, and we'll kind of talk about which sets of skills you can have for positions 1 to 2 and positions 3 to 4 and what those differences may look like. Lick Wounds. Lick Wounds is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to heal yourself for 8 HP. Once again, this functions between rows 2 and 4. Pretty good versatility once again. Obviously, you can't use it in the front. I would be hesitant to use Lick Wounds if you have something on called the Spiked Collar, which I'll show you now. Obviously, minus 50% healing skills, which means you're only going to get 4 health from Lick Wounds. Would not recommend keeping that trinket on and that ability, so that's something to keep in track. Anytime healing skills or healing received is reduced, I would recommend maybe putting Lick Wounds on the back burner, because you really don't want to put on an ability that's only going to give you potentially 3 to 5 HP, depending on how significant the healing received or healing skills is reduced. It's decent in the early game because he can heal himself, and sometimes it's better than the Vestal heal, because the Vestal's pretty weak in the beginning, and she may have to heal other people, or the Occultist may be getting zeros. This is just a reliable way to make sure your Houndmaster lives without burdening your healer. Blackjack. Blackjack and Cry Havoc are probably the 2 most row restrictive on your end because they only function in 2 positions. Now, that's often what I would say most other people are, but for the Houndmaster, he usually has the luxury of functioning at least in 3 rows. This one's only in 2, but the ability Blackjack is really strong and makes up for that. Obviously, it's going to be first or second row on your side. Accuracy of 115, which is pretty high. I like my attacks around 110, 115, because even with 30 dodge, it's still an 85% accuracy, which is pretty good. Damage modification of negative 65%, once again, not a high damage skill. And the crit modifier is 9%, which is pretty good. Now what I will say is the stun of 150% is 10% above average stun, which is pretty good. Also, with the crit modifier of 9%, you're looking at probably between a 15-20% to critically strike. Like the Occultist, that would bump that up to 170%, which is rather strong. This can hit between rows 1 and 3 on the enemy lineup. And often I call those, 3 and 4 the coveted position, so he can still hit the 3rd with Blackjack, which is pretty good. I like stuns I can hit position 4, because often that's where your Fusiliers are, your Witches, Bone Royalty, Viragos. I mean, all those guys that are significantly heavy damage dealers or stress damage dealers tend to sit in the 4th position. Not always, they can be in the 3rd. But when they're in the 4th position, Blackjack, it's not that it's bad, it's just it can't hit that 4th position too well. Now what you can argue is you'll probably have Hounds Harry on or Hounds Rush, and you'll be able to hit that 4th position anyways, but Blackjack's a pretty solid choice if you need to stun the front rows, who may have a higher stun resistance. It would be wrong to talk about the Houndmaster without at least talking about the dog treats. They give you 50% damage and 15 accuracy for 3 rounds, which can push that Houndmaster's somewhat average damage of 7 to 13 to pretty good, along with the fact if you're going to hit a marked target or a beast. If you have the Crimson Court DLC, what I will say is the final trinket set for the Houndmaster will also do more damage against bleed. Therefore, if you hit a beast that is bleeding and marked with a dog treat, oh my, are you expecting massive damage to come out. You get dog treats in your provisions. It's something that you can get rid of at the beginning of the dungeon, but often I like keeping my dog treats for those bigger fights where you need just a little bit of that raw burst damage or accuracy. Obviously with 15% more accuracy, the accuracy of Hounds Rush and Hounds Harry goes to 120, therefore your 75 to 80% chance goes to almost 95%, which is very good and almost a guaranteed hit in most situations. The last thing I want to talk about with the Houndmaster, and the reason why I use them for a lot of medium dungeons, is release the Hound Camping skill. I made sure I always bought this on all my Houndmasters because the 30% extra scouting chance, along with the survival guide, gave you about a 60 to 70% chance to scout. And in the early game, that is amazing, and you can really try to navigate rooms so you don't take a lot of fights. So I use this in probably the first third, if it was a dungeon setup where I could get multiple scouts and get multiple rooms. If it was a long snaky line, I'd probably use this in the last half because I have to go through every fight and every room, which quickly burns through your 4 battles. The pros of the Houndmaster are, he has decent starting speed. The Houndmaster has a strong row versatility of skills hitting the enemy and skills helping yourselves. Some of the things I talked about, the differences between a 1st and 2nd position Houndmaster versus a 3rd and 4th. Currently, the skills I have on this Houndmaster, as you can see, highlight the 3rd and 4th position. Most likely, 1st position Houndmasters would probably take off, at least Cry Havoc, and you could either pick on Guard Dog, and you could also potentially take off Hounds Harry and put on Blackjack, which make him a more stronger 2nd position. You could still keep on Hounds Harry and keep him a strong 2nd position, as you see. This would be maybe possibly a 2nd position Houndmaster and would be extremely effective. Some of the cons of the Houndmaster are his base HP is only 37, which isn't the lowest, but it's also not the highest. His base dodge is also 30, which is pretty high. If the Houndmaster takes a critical or gets targeted once or twice, it could mean that he's at about a third of his HP, if not on death's door, which is problematic. I always had about 2 to 3 Houndmasters in my roster due to the fact that they can do decent damage and the scouting potential and trap disarm chance they usually offer. They're also great candidates to give things such as the ancestral map or survival guides to increase their scouting chance and their trap disarm chance. If you decide to use the Houndmaster, I think you'll realize there's a lot of situations the Houndmaster can fit, and there's a plethora of bosses the Houndmaster can be good at. The only dungeon I think I'd recommend the Houndmaster not going into is the Ruins, because obviously he can't bleed any of the skeletons because most of their bleed resistances are over 200%. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe below.